Thank you very much, Susanna, and good morning, everybody. It's nice to be able to give you an update, finally, on our virus yellows variety testing. As I'm sure many of you are aware, we've been undertaking this work now for many years, and with the support of all the breeding efforts that are going on across Europe. The experiment earned its name of Goliath back in 2019 in the BBRO office when we were drafting out the trial and realised how large an area we would need to do this trial properly. For any of you unfamiliar with the trial, hopefully you can see here we have some plots of sugar beet and we are buffering them with a mixture of rye and radish, and they're there to ensure that our well-trained aphids that we use to inoculate the plots are kept within their boundaries. The beet are then grown obviously through to harvest, where we can assess the detail. And really I want to emphasise what you can expect in the next few years as these varieties come to market, and really that we're on a journey to full-on immune or resistant virus yellows varieties. What you can see here from last year's data is how the symptoms progressed. So this was a lovely picture taken in July, and you can start seeing the virus plots here showing various degrees of yellowing. By October, again, you can see differences. The control plots are staying nice and green. The radish has senesced and was feeding the local bird population, and the virus plots were starting to really show their true colours. Come November, though, and this is probably when you'd think about assessing a variety, they've all gone yellow. And that is not unexpected given the nature of these viruses. So you just have to think back to the summer, how they looked. And it's quite a stark story with the changing in their symptom expression. And again, we're trying to cope with 3 different viruses simultaneously, so that make up the virus yellows complex. The least aggressive being beet chlorosis virus that you'd expect up to around 25% yield loss. Then beet mild, sort of the medium virus, which you can see up to 30% yield loss. And our most aggressive, and it's not related to the other 2 at all, is the beet yellows virus. And these are all transmitted by aphids, mainly Myzus persicae, the peach potato aphid. And if you're very unlucky, Myzus can transmit all 3 simultaneously. We breed up several hundred thousand, if not millions, of aphids every year in our various growth facilities, both at BBRO and those we hire. And you can see here some aphids in our brand new growth room feeding on a very nice looking beet yellows leaf. You can see how good the symptom expression is there. They will have acquired a lot of virus particles, and they're ready to go out to the field. And it is literally a back-breaking job for the BBRO team and those that we rope in. And you can see simultaneously here that the team I'm in, we're inoculating beet chlorosis, and the team at the back are inoculating the beet mild. Every single plant is inoculated, so the testing we are doing is literally a crash test. This is putting the plants under their very worst case scenario. And we've now been doing this for several years. So this is just the Goliath photos through the years. Starting in 2019, the first year that the neonics were being withdrawn, 2020, and then coming forward to the present day. We added beet chlorosis into the mix in 2022, so we're now testing against all 3 of the yellowing viruses. We've tested thousands and thousands of plots in this time, and we're now building up a very strong and reliable data set. Unfortunately, though, we only have 1 virus yellows variety on the current recommended list. So you'll see Marussia from KWS here on the very right-hand side, and not a very widely grown variety yet. So you'll see it has quite a yield drag on it, not unexpected with the introduction of new traits. And that probably has meant that you've been opting for the higher risk of growing a conventional variety, but happy to take more of a yield hit. But the new varieties that are coming through are starting to show more diverse phenotypes and are staying greener for longer. And what you'll see here is what they look like on the last day. I took a photo of one rep of every plot. And you'll see it's a bit like an advent calendar because this is falling in the order they were randomized. But you'll see some of the varieties off the RL are named. And you'll just see how the symptoms express. So this is with beet chlorosis, with beet mild, and finally, the most aggressive beet yellows. So the key message I wish to convey and for you to take home is that these varieties will not stay bright green to the end if they're infested with virus. They're not immune, they're not resistant, they are tolerant. And the most important thing is what's going on in the ground. The yield data are really encouraging, and we're starting to now see a big uplift in the yield of these new types of varieties. And what you can see across the bottom is a range of the virus yellows specific varieties, and then on the left-hand side, the named varieties are the controls. Any difference less than this error bar here between the bars here shows no significant drop in yield, and you'll now see several of these varieties are now maintaining their yield with the poloroviruses. And they are beet mild, beet chlorosis, and in some years, they are the more abundant virus type. So that is a really encouraging step forward. Regularly, we go out with the drone and fly the trial as well, and we're gaining some very valuable insights. And this is when I say it's more important to look at how they look in the summer, because that is when the crop is really building its yield. It doesn't matter so much what it looks like 2 days before harvest. You don't need to look at all the detail on here. Just remember some of these bars, especially the ones where there's very little drop here. So this is a measure of canopy chlorophyll level in July, and you'll see some of the virus treatments are far more stripy than others, and that indicates varieties that are staying greener. So the more red a plot is, the greener it remained at that time. There's a very complicated regression graph here as well. I want you to focus on this value here. We are now getting very good at estimating yield performance of these varieties in the summer. So hopefully that means we can feed back data to the breeders sooner and also drive variety decision-making earlier as well. So that's really encouraging. But of course, what does this mean to us all on farm when you've made your seed orders, and how are you going to interpret this data? So we are proposing a rating scheme that will harmonise ratings across all 3 viruses. And I will just state that this is only provisional at this stage, so don't take this as gospel, it could well change. And varieties will be rated and banded by a 10% level. So if a variety loses less than 10% versus its control plots, it would be rated an A and considered tolerant. If a variety loses no yield at all, it would be awarded an A+, and would be immune, resistant, or fully tolerant. You can use the term you like. There's then B, C, and D. D only would be used for beet yellows because you wouldn't expect any more than that level of loss to the poloroviruses. And they are partially tolerant, and then anything more than 40% would be considered susceptible. And hopefully this will start driving forward variety choices. Of course, you also have to interpret it alongside the yield performance of each variety, and we would publish, and we will publish our yield data, but you would also need to interpret it with the recommended list. And of course, this is where paying attention to detail will be very important. And as I said earlier, this is the ultimate worst case scenario for these varieties, with every single plant being inoculated. We're not applying any other mitigation strategy, and all the things I was telling you about 12 months ago in our IPM triangle. This is really to set your very best or worst scenario by using tolerant varieties. What does this look like in practicality, and how could you use it? So this is the data. I've combined the last 2 years' worth of data where we had varieties that we've grown both years. And you can see here there's quite a lot of data there to interpret and try and understand. So instead, it's all been rounded to the nearest percent of yield loss and then colour-coded. And what you'll see here is some of the susceptible varieties are starting to show poorer performance that we would expect, especially Daphne, for example, that sort of very typical nearly 50% yield loss. and then they're given their coding. But of course, you can see there's still higher yield with some of the susceptible varieties versus some of these new candidates. So you've got to balance the sort of risk and the reward together. What I can say is we're fairly confident in the data we're producing. So these are the scores that Marussia and BTS 1915 generated in the last 2 years. And this is the score that these same varieties have had with all the data we've gathered. So the rankings are staying the same, but it is a very blunt tool. We're not expecting it to be very refined because, of course, yield is affected by a whole multitude of factors. But what does this actually look like on farm, and what is the potential to use it? So really, I need you to think about several different factors. Firstly, that is what the yield could be, and you need to take that data from the recommended list, along with interpretations of how your own crops are doing. Then, of course, we're providing you with sort of the worst case losses from our inoculated trials. And then what is the risk that you're exposed to as well? And what's your attitude to risk? Are you happy to grow a high-yielding, high-loss variety, or would you rather have a variety that will hold its yield but may yield less to begin with? And all of that together helps you make your variety choice. Now, I appreciate that's a lot to take on board. So there is a quick worked example. So I've got 3 varieties here, X, Y, and Z. You can see their yield potential varies quite a lot. And then I've taken their rankings, and this is the very worst case yield loss you would expect. So we're expecting no more than 10% yield loss to beat mild. And you can see that's been taken off. 20% here for Y, and the same for Z. So they are losing more. So if you knew you were going to have a big beat mild year, you might want to opt for X. And then looking at beat yellows, of course, the yield loss is still going to be higher, but then Z becomes the most attractive choice. So we don't have a crystal ball, though. I can't tell you what virus is prevalent on your farm for each year. It does vary on what the aphids are transmitting. And it is hard to assess that at the moment. The data that come out of Rothamsted and the modelling work we support there will help guide decision making. And of course, you need to consider other risk factors too. And of course, as I was preaching about BCN first thing this morning, that might be an overriding trait that is considered by you more important than, say, a virus yellows trait. So our target remains looking for A pluses for all virus yellows species. That would be the ultimate game. And really, we think precision breeding is needed to do that. In the interim, though, we will continue to test varieties, and we're there to help you make an informed decision. But as I said, it will be a blunt tool, and that is why we're not dialing down in the precise detail, because your yield will depend on some of these factors. How you're treating it, when you're drilling it, when the aphids migrate in as well, and what virus each aphid is carrying. But we continue to test more varieties each year. More high-yielding varieties seem to be on the horizon as well, which is really encouraging. So that's a summary of Goliath. I'm now going to take you forward into what's going to be going on in 2025. And we continue this is a quick update. And I urge you to come to our open days in the summer because the team from Rothamsted will be there. And they are working on this StatBeat project that's looking at a localized or regionalized form of virus yellows risk modeling. And that would take into account some of the data I've already shown you and hopefully produce for you a dynamic assessment of your risk from virus yellows. Because, of course, it remains our greatest threat to sugar beet production, not just here in the UK, but also Northwest Europe too. But in the interim, we continue to engage our monitoring activities. And hopefully some of you have seen our model crop watch station in the corner. If you haven't, please do have a look at the end. And this is our sort of all-in one-stop shop now for all of our crop monitoring activities. And what is Crop Watch going to be? It's still a bit of a concept, but it's that centralized hub for all the monitoring activities we already do. And when you sit down, and I had a piece of paper and wrote down all the things we actually monitor at BBRO with help from the industry, it's amazing how many bits of data we gather, but they all get put in different places. So it's one central hub, and you will be able to access it in one central location. But it's also a way of testing new technology and tools as they come on stream. And as I'm a bit of a gadget fiend, it's quite an exciting opportunity to see what's coming out there, and the agri-tech sector is always very busy. And hopefully combining that data we've already got with new insights develops more information for you to be able to make informed decisions across your farms. So as I said, we do a lot of monitoring already, and you can see here just some examples of that. You're probably all very familiar with the yellow water pan network that's been operated since 1990, and you can see a very much more haired version of Professor Stevens there. It's a very good early warning system for detecting when aphids start migrating into the crops. Of course, we have our overriding estimates coming from the suction traps at Broomsbarn and at Curtin, but this gives us more idea of where they are locally. And this year we'll be running 20 yellow water pan sites. But of course, we also have aphid count sites, which will now be called aphid watch sites, where many of the British Sugar team and our own team are busy on their hands and knees actually counting aphids on plants. And that has been being done since the 1960s. And I urge you to check out my article in the latest edition of Beet Review to give you a bit more idea on that and how that drove the formation of our current aphid threshold. More recently, we've added Cercospora and moths to the monitoring network, and this has extended how long it operates for, from just aphids in the spring all the way through to autumn. So moth traps, the idea is they're lured in by a pheromone and then get stuck on the sticky trap. And with Cercospora, we have two forms of monitoring. We have the Spornado network, which catches the spores when they're on the wind, and we also use modelling through WeatherQuest to produce these very localised risk calculations. Going forward with the testing of new technologies, we are a launch customer for the Delta T Silora network. This replaces our previous Sencrop systems, and this offers us more insights on the actual weather conditions in the field. And you'll see the range of sensors we have, or will have, on our model station. So we're going to be looking at crop temperature, humidity, leaf wetness, rainfall, soil moisture as well. And hopefully all these factors will help you understand soil temperature for drilling, all the way through to frost risk at harvest. Georgina touched on the PlentySense sensors as well, and we'll have 4 of these at 4 of our sites this year to try to look at nitrate levels and how that data might be able to help you with fertilizer decisions in the future. We're also going to be trying some of the new magic traps from Bayer. The idea is they have a camera in them that takes photographs several times a day, and then hopefully using some AI will quantify them. And I mentioned also the new Ferra service this morning, and I'll come back to that. And that's quite an exciting step forward in measuring that soil biology. And I urge you to make use of this data because it is a significant investment from us to us. So it represents around about a £300,000 investment over the next 3 years. And then, of course, we're looking at new insights as well. So tracking crop growth is one key measure, especially if we can relate that to the soil conditions and nitrogen supply. And can we detect new threats? We have the likes of our new threat, the beet moth, but also threats that might be coming in from Europe, the leaf hoppers that transmit rubber root disease. Of course, Susanna's touched on rhizomania, and there's a blinker up there. Things like that are worth monitoring, and strain variation in Cercospora as well. And the canopy monitoring, I think, will become very useful to us, and if we can get it right, you'll be able to compare the crop growth in your own crops versus your local crop watch station. This is roughly what the network is hoped to look like this year. So if you're near a green dot, that is a full crop watch station. If it's an orange one, it's an enhanced Crop Watch Plus site, so that has some of the most novel tools like the digital aphid trap in it as well. And then we also have the aphid watch stations as well. And it is a true industry-wide collaboration. So ourselves at BBRO, thank you to the field team for running around about 6 sites. British Sugar as well, similar amount. And then collaboration across our research partners and the NFU Sugar Board growers to host the remaining sites. And that brings us up to a total of 20 sites. And this just shows you what you can expect at different times in the year. Do have a look at the Cercospora mapping as well and what the insights will look like. This is what that ferra data I've mentioned earlier will look like. And what the idea is, it tells you how healthy your soil might be. And we'll do it pre and post harvest. And we'll see what impact long-term sugar beet production may have on your soils. This is what some of the weather data looks like. So there'll be a station in the field. So I hope they don't get knocked over too much by the sprayers. But we're measuring a whole array of metrics, as I said, with the Solora system. And that will be available to you all year round. And each site will have a dedicated dashboard where you can look at the most relevant data through the year. And then, of course, you should be familiar, I hope, with our aphid dashboard. That will continue. And you'll be able to see when the aphids are migrating. But then that allows us to get some really useful insights as well. So I really like this graph. This shows you when aphids were migrating at Morley, so near Norwich. We had this very wet spring, and then as soon as it dried up for a while, massive migration of aphids. Starts raining again, and the migration stops. And then it starts again, but really to no major level. And the more data we can gather and combine together, the more accurate we hope our prediction of crop condition will be. Another thing, just to reassure you, is the work that goes on with the virus testing in the lab. So Susanna and the team tested 1,500 aphids that were caught across the 17 pans this year. And you can see the majority of them are carrying turnip yellows virus, which we understand not to be a risk to sugar beet. Only 4 of them were either carrying beet mild or beet chlorosis, so it's around about 0.25%. But of course, we know incidence of virus was higher than that, but it's useful to keep relating all these factors together. The Cercospora diagnostics have now been used for 2 years in a row, and we'll continue to update on a weekly basis from our spore trapping. And you can see here with this graphic how the sites changed. So when they go yellow, we're catching spores. And then around about a week or 2 later, when they go sort of this reddy colour, there's an active infection and symptoms visible on the leaves. What's most interesting is fungicide can be applied, of course, and we often see then a reprieve on the spores before then they come back with a vengeance. Very nicely illustrated here. So you'll see spores in 2023, we saw a big, we had 10 sites running. We saw the majority of them had spores in July. Most of them, though, were sensitive to the QOI chemistry that's widely used. And then you see the number of sites actually with spores being caught drops quite significantly. And then we start to see resistant spores instead. So clearly the use of the chemistry is driving that shift to the resistant ones. And we're interested to see if this resets every year or if we're going to see a permanent shift to resistant types of Cercospora. And of course, the data will mean nothing unless we've got some yield data at the end of it. So this will be a combination of data from hand digs by the field team and our running through the BBRO plot facility at Wissington and also getting access to the data from commercial lifts as well. So for 2025, the data will be hosted on the BBRO website, and there is already a dedicated landing page, but there's not a lot on it yet. But do have a look, and we will send the link round through our various communication channels when it's ready. And you'll be able to see all of our monitoring that I've already outlined. But long term, the plan is that there'll be a dedicated online dashboard, and you'll be able to interact with the data in a more fluid manner. But more details on what that will look like in the future is yet to come. But really, I do urge you, have a look at the model station, get an idea of the equipment we're going to be using. If anyone wishes to host one of these sites, we do have a few holes still, so please do come forward. And do make use of this data. This is hopefully local data. All the sites should be fairly local to you to really help make those informed, detailed decisions. So that's everything I have to update on. Really, it's now time for questions. And whilst the other speakers now join us join me up on stage, really it's just a chance to recap those take-home messages. I think we've all been on about hygiene. Hygiene is probably the most important way of keeping your crops healthy. So do consider cleaning up those spoil heaps when you get home. Get your timing of eliminating those cover crops correct as well. The longer we can break that green bridge for, the better the 2025 crop is going to fare. Georgina touched on very nicely tailoring nitrogen use as well. So consider how much you're using. We don't want you to over-apply. Obviously, it's not good for the crop, but it's not good for your gross margins either. Make use of Crop Watch and keep an eye out for links to it. And of course, hopefully that spurs you on to go out and really pay detail to your own crops and monitor their performance. So I'll now ask Mark, Susanna and George to join us back on stage.